The first time they saw her, it wasn't in the forest. It was on the highway. She stood at the median, a scrap of windblown fur and muscle, too young to be alone, too wild to be dead. Her ribs jutted out like someone had sketched her hastily and forgotten to finish the lines. Her eyes, golden, round, alert, met Marla's through the windshield. They held for only a second, but it was enough. Caleb had slammed the brakes. "Did you see that?" Marla breathed. Caleb was already turning the car around. She didn't run when they approached. Didn't flinch when Caleb crouched a few feet away, arms outstretched, his vet's voice low and calm. "Easy, girl. You're just a baby, aren't you?" she hissed once. Then collapsed. They named her Naira, after the goddess of twilight. That night, as the wind whispered through the cedar trees outside their home in northern Vermont, Marla wrapped Naira in an old wool blanket and held her beside the fire. The young bobcat didn't move. She didn't tremble or cry. She only blinked, slowly, deliberately, and kept her body pressed against Marla's warmth as if she hadn't felt safe in years. They lived alone, tucked into the slope of an old hillside house miles from town, wrapped in pine and silence. The nearest neighbors were trees. The sound of civilization ended at the gravel driveway. It was a house meant for children, for laughter and noise, but it had been quiet for too long. 7 years of trying. 3 miscarriages. 2 failed IVF cycles. And a nursery that still smelled like fresh paint and hope turned to dust. Marla Keene was 38, soft-featured with hair the color of rusted maple leaves. Her hands carried the stillness of someone who had once woven fabric for a living but now gardened to feel grounded. Caleb, 41, had a face made of sharp lines and tired kindness, his days spent treating the pets of people who never quite knew how to love them. Naira, in her way, fit right in. She had that look, a creature who had known too much wilderness to ever be tame, and too much pain to ever return. But oddly, violently, she bonded with Marla. Not Caleb. Not the house. Just Marla. She followed her from room to room like a shadow wearing fur. By day, she was docile. Curious. Playful. She'd nose open cabinet doors and paw at curtains like a kitten unsure how the world was stitched together. She'd curl in the sun by the bookshelf while Marla read aloud softly, words meant for no one. Sometimes she'd leap unexpectedly into Marla's lap, claws carefully retracted, just resting her head on her thigh with a sigh. Caleb would smile. "She likes you. She needs me," Marla would whisper. "That's different." The first incident came quietly. They were lying in bed, Marla drifting toward sleep, Caleb tracing circles on her back, when a sudden scratch ripped across her shoulder. She gasped. The lamp snapped on. Blood dotted the sheet. Naira sat on the dresser, low to the wood, her back arched. Her golden eyes were narrow, dark, focused on Marla. "Jesus," Caleb said, standing. "Did she?" "She didn't mean it," Marla said automatically. But her voice trembled. The next night was worse. It happened during one of those rare moments when they tried to touch, to reach across the distance grief had carved between them. Caleb had kissed her gently, then more urgently, his hands sliding to her hips. That's when Naira shrieked, from the corner of the room, like something feral had been hiding under the bed. By the time they noticed her, she was charging. Claws bared. Teeth flashing. She launched herself at the bed. Not Caleb, Marla. The bruises were small but deep. A thin scratch across her thigh. A shallow bite near her wrist. Not enough to be fatal, but too deliberate to ignore. "I'm scared of her," Marla said 3 days later, her voice cracking over coffee. "But then she comes to me like nothing's wrong. She curls beside me on the couch. She licks my hand." Caleb ran a hand through his hair. "She's nocturnal. It's probably instinct. Nighttime makes her different. No. This is personal." Marla's eyes were bloodshot. "It's me. She's only attacking me." Caleb hesitated. "Only when we're intimate," Marla finished. "She waits. She listens. They started locking the bedroom door. They installed motion lights in the hall. Caleb reinforced the bottom of the door with a steel plate. But she always found a way in. One night, they heard her chewing through the wood frame. Another time, she scaled the bookshelf to drop from the ceiling beam. She'd appear like a specter, silent, predatory, just when Marla would start to laugh, or gasp, or feel alive. They began sleeping in shifts. Marla on the couch. Caleb in the guest room. Naira roamed freely, pretending nothing had happened. Days remained peaceful. She'd rub her head against Marla's leg in the garden. She'd press her paws to the glass when Caleb returned from work. She purred deep and rhythmic in the hours before dusk. But night was a different country. And something inside her knew how to hurt. Then came the hallway mirror. Marla passed it just after midnight on her way back from the kitchen. And froze. Naira was there. Behind her. But she wasn't watching Marla's face. She was watching her stomach. Her womb. A deep, low growl rumbled from the Bobcat's throat. Marla didn't move. Just whispered, "What do you see?" Naira turned and disappeared into the dark. It wasn't logical. But grief rarely is. She began to feel like Naira was haunting her body. Not attacking, but reacting, like something about Marla triggered her. Something she hadn't said. Or hadn't faced. Caleb suggested sedation. "Maybe we can rewire her," he said. "With meds. Therapy." But Marla shook her head. "No. I think she's trying to tell us something." So she bought a camera. The night vision glowed green on the screen. The hallway was empty. The bedroom door was closed. Then movement. Naira appeared at the end of the hall. Her ears twitched. She paced, circled, crouched. She did not scratch. She waited. Then a sound, Marla's laughter. Followed by a soft moan. Caleb's voice. The creak of mattress springs. And in that moment, Naira snapped. She hurled herself at the door with all the fury of something possessed. Scratched. Bit. Howled. Not like a bobcat. Like a mother. Losing something. Again. Marla didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table, camera in hand, Naira curled beneath it, her golden eyes watching, always watching. "What did they do to you?" Marla whispered, running her fingers gently through the cat's rough fur. "What did you lose?" The bobcat didn't answer. But her breath slowed. Her tail curled around Marla's foot. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't attack. They watched it in silence. The television glowed cold in the living room, the edges of the screen throwing a bluish haze over the floorboards. Outside, the Vermont woods rustled faintly in the autumn wind, but inside the house, everything stood still, except the flickering of the camera footage. 11:42 p.m. The hallway was empty. A moment later, the bedroom door closed. Then she appeared. Naira. She slipped into frame like mist, quiet, weightless, her paws silent on the oakwood floor. Her body was low, her eyes wide and glowing in the infrared. She didn't meow or yowl. She didn't blink. She just listened. "She's waiting," Marla whispered. Caleb didn't respond. He was hunched forward, elbows on his knees, the remote forgotten in his hand. The recording continued. 11:47 p.m. Naira's ears twitched. She began to pace, slow at first, her tail twitching like a wire under tension. She moved with purpose, not aimless, not curious. Like she knew exactly what was about to happen. Then came the sound. Faint. Muffled. A laugh. A moan. Sheets rustling. Intimacy. Naira stopped dead. Head lifted. Mouth opened slightly, like a silent hiss. Then, she launched herself at the bedroom door. Marla gasped aloud. Even Caleb flinched. On the screen, Naira hurled her body again and again at the door. Her claws tore at the frame. Her mouth foamed slightly from the effort. She snarled so loudly the camera mic distorted. But still, she didn't try to hurt Caleb. Her fury was directed only at Marla. That night, after the footage stopped and the screen went black, neither of them spoke for a long time. It was Marla who finally broke the silence. "I don't think this is about now," she said softly. "I think this is about something that happened before us." Caleb didn't answer. His jaw was tight, fingers locked together. But his eyes, normally so calm, were wide with something she hadn't seen in years. Fear. They brought her to the clinic the next morning. Dr. Isabel Sims had known Caleb since vet school. She was a behaviorist, sharp-eyed and... "You're sure you want to keep her?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "She's juvenile, semi-feral, and highly reactive. It's a cocktail for disaster." "She's bonded with us," Marla said quickly. "She's bonded with you," Caleb corrected gently. "And she's showing signs of trauma. Something triggers her at night." Isabel studied Naira through the glass window of the observation room. The bobcat was still, crouched low in the corner of the kennel, her golden eyes locked on Marla outside. She didn't growl. Didn't hiss. She just waited. 2 hours later, Isabel re-entered the consultation room, clutching a tablet. "Okay," she began. "You're not wrong. She's experienced some kind of neurological or emotional imprinting, likely from early maternal separation." Caleb nodded. "She was found alone. No littermates. Probably orphaned." "She wasn't just orphaned," Isabel said quietly. "She was rejected." Marla frowned. "What's the difference?" "Rejection is active," Isabel replied. "It means the mother knew she was there, and still left her behind. That does something irreversible to a creature's psyche. Especially with bobcats. They imprint young. Losing that bond doesn't just create fear, it creates fixation. On people. On sounds. On patterns." Marla's throat tightened. "You're saying she thinks I'm her mother?" Isabel hesitated. "Or she thinks you're someone who threatens what her mother lost. Or was taken from." Then came the part they weren't ready for. "I ran a blood panel too," Isabel said, turning the tablet toward them. "There's something else. Something deeper." On screen, a chart flickered: white cell counts, infection markers, platelet collapse. "She has a rare congenital blood infection," she said. "We only see it in severely inbred or abandoned felines, especially ones who've been exposed to multiple sedatives or tranquilizers before maturity. It's destroying her immune system. Her red cell turnover is half of what it should be." Caleb leaned forward. "How long?" Isabel's eyes softened. "Months. Maybe a year. If you're lucky." The room went silent. Marla's hands trembled in her lap. "She's dying?" she whispered. Isabel nodded. Slowly. Peacefully for now. "But yes. There's no treatment. No cure. It's degenerative." That night, Marla curled up on the rug beside the fire. Naira lay beside her, stretched long and quiet, her flank rising and falling in slow, shallow breaths. The house was dim. The silence was absolute. Marla reached out, fingers gently brushing Naira's rough fur. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Why do you look at me like I'm the thing you lost?" Naira didn't respond. But she leaned into the touch. Caleb stood at the stairs, watching from the shadows. And for a moment, something unspoken passed between them all. Not threat. Not fear. Grief. Over the next few weeks, things began to change. Naira stopped attacking. Not immediately. But gradually. As if something inside her had shifted. Marla kept the camera running every night. And while Naira still paced the hallway, she no longer lunged at the door. She no longer growled when she heard them laugh, or touch, or breathe together. Instead, she sat, head tilted, watching. Always watching. Marla began adding a few drops of medication to her food, an experimental mix Isabel had approved to ease inflammation and anxiety. It helped. A little. She started gaining weight again. Her coat grew glossier. She even began playing, bounding across the hallway with a stuffed cloth fox Marla had stitched together from old baby clothes she'd never used. Caleb joked one night, "She's regressing. Like she's being reborn." But Marla just smiled. Maybe she's finally safe enough to be young. And then, unexpectedly, it happened. Marla got sick. At first, she thought it was the stress. Nausea. Dizziness. Fatigue. Then the cravings started. Her skin felt electric. The garden smelled too sweet. One morning, while watering the lavender, she doubled over and vomited into the soil. Caleb rushed her to the clinic. And there, as the ultrasound machine beeped softly and the monitor flickered to life, a technician placed a cold wand on her belly and gasped. A heartbeat. Then another. I don't understand," Marla stammered. "We haven't done treatment in years," Caleb whispered. The technician turned wide-eyed. "Well, somehow, you're 9 weeks pregnant." They drove home in stunned silence. Naira met them at the porch, her body pressed against the doorframe like a sentinel. And as Marla stepped inside, something strange happened. Naira didn't run to her. She didn't growl. She lowered her head. And gently, deliberately, she pressed her forehead against Marla's stomach. As if she'd known. As if she'd always known. That night, Marla didn't lock the bedroom door. Naira didn't pace. She curled at the foot of the bed. And slept. For the first time in months, everyone in the house did. Snow came early that year. It powdered the rooftop in delicate silence, tracing the edges of the porch swing and clinging to the dried lavender stalks that had once lined Marla's garden. But inside the Keene house, things had begun to bloom again, for the first time in years, in a way that didn't feel fragile or borrowed. The baby? He wasn't just real, he was thriving. Marla's skin glowed beneath the warm light of the kitchen. Her hands, once raw and dry from grief and work, now moved with purpose. She read pregnancy books aloud in the evenings, not because she needed the information, but because Naira, curled on the rug, seemed to listen. Caleb couldn't explain it. Either of them could. All they knew was that after years of trying, after injections and failures and heartbreak, life had arrived without warning, without intervention. And somehow, Naira had known before anyone. She stayed close. Never far from Marla's feet. Never absent from the doorway. She watched the crib being built with unsettling attention, her eyes fixed as Caleb screwed the final slat into place. She lay beneath Marla's chair at breakfast, her tail curled tight and still. She rubbed against the belly whenever she passed, slow and deliberate. And she growled at strangers. Even Isabel, who came to check on Naira's condition every few weeks, was met with a low, warning rumble when she stepped too close. "She's protective," Isabel muttered, narrowing her eyes. "No," Marla corrected gently. "She's guarding." "Guarding what?" Marla looked down at her belly and whispered. "Something she never got to keep." The blood tests were clearer now. Naira's condition had plateaued, but only just. The medication slowed the infection. It bought time. But her white cell count was still dangerously low. Her red cells still collapsed too quickly. Her breath remained shallow on cold nights. Her paws trembled when she stood too fast. "She's fading," Isabel said one evening, voice soft. "I know," Caleb replied. "But she's not showing pain," Isabel added, her voice drifting toward all. "It's like she doesn't want anyone to see she's dying." Caleb's jaw tightened. "She won't. Not until the baby's born." "Why do you think that?" Caleb didn't answer. Because he'd seen the way Naira's eyes changed when Marla entered the room. Because she hadn't missed a single heartbeat since the pregnancy began. Because somehow, in some strange, unspeakable way, she knew she couldn't leave yet. Marla gave birth on a storm-soaked morning in late March. They didn't make it to the hospital. The contractions started just after sunrise. Caleb was already preparing the bags, calling ahead, warming the car. But halfway down the stairs, Marla doubled over with a cry that stopped him cold. "It's too fast," she gasped. I can't, Caleb, I can't. He didn't hesitate. He cleared the living room, grabbed blankets, boiled water. Years of training returned like instinct. But he wasn't the first one to reach her. Naira was already there, sitting in front of the couch, silent, unmoving, her golden eyes locked on Marla's face. I don't want her to see me like this, Marla whispered through gritted teeth. She shouldn't, she'll be afraid. She won't leave, Caleb said quietly. And she didn't. 2 hours later, Haven Grace Keene entered the world in a rush of breath and blood, her first cry rising into the beams of the old ceiling like a prayer answered at last. Marla sobbed. Not from pain, but from something deeper, release, wonder, disbelief. She clutched the tiny, trembling child against her chest, eyes wide and wet. She's here, she gasped. Caleb laughed, choked, his hands still shaking. And Naira, who had not moved from her place on the floor, rose slowly. She stepped forward. Gently, almost reverently, she placed her head against Marla's shin. Then she turned to the baby. And bowed her head. They never spoke of it again. Not really. Not the way the room had filled with a kind of warmth that defied logic. Not the way Haven had stopped crying the moment Naira's breath brushed her cheek. Not the way the Bobcat had laid down beside them, curled tightly, and closed her eyes. As if she could finally rest. The days that followed were the happiest in the house's memory. Marla nursed by the fire. Caleb rocked the child with the kind of quiet men rarely show. The nursery, long dormant, now pulsed with the scent of baby powder and morning light. The wooden crib creaked softly when Haven stirred. The wind outside felt less intrusive. The silence less oppressive. Naira never left the room. She became more than a pet, more than a creature. She became something sacred. A guardian. A memory made flesh. She would lie beside the crib, head resting on crossed paws, eyes fluttering shut only after the baby did. When Marla walked the hallway late at night, Haven nestled to her chest, Naira would follow silently, just behind. Always just behind. And then, slowly, the end began. She stopped eating first. Even with the meds, her appetite vanished. The rich meats Marla once coaxed her with now sat untouched. Her water bowl remained full. Her fur dulled. Her breathing thinned. But she never whimpered. She never cried. She never asked for more than the space to stay close. Caleb carried her one night to the front porch, wrapped in a wool blanket. Marla sat beside him, Haven sleeping in her arms. Naira lay across Caleb's lap, frail now, so light it felt like a handful of leaves, not a living thing. She waited, Marla said, barely audible. She waited for Haven. Caleb nodded. She didn't just protect this baby, he said. She brought her. The morning Naira died was unbearably quiet. The wind didn't move. The woods stood still. Not a single crow called. Marla found her at the base of the maple tree, curled in the same place where they'd first seen her from the car all those months ago. Her body was at peace. Her eyes, though closed, still seemed to be watching something. Haven was just beginning to sit up on her own. She babbled softly as Marla knelt beside the tree, laid her hand on Naira's still form, and began to cry. Not just for the loss, but for the mystery of it. For the ache of something that was never fully explainable. Naira hadn't just lived in their home. She'd healed it. She hadn't just shared their grief. She'd transformed it. They buried her beneath the maple tree. Caleb carved a plaque from pine wood and burned her name into it with a soldering iron. Marla placed a small mitten, Haven's first, at the base of the stone. No words were spoken. No eulogy. No hymn. Just the hush of wind picking up again. Just the leaves fluttering above like a spirit exhaling. That night, Haven refused to sleep in the crib. She cried and twisted until Marla placed her in the corner of the room, on the rug where Naira used to lie. She curled there, small and warm and quiet, one hand pressed against the wood. And finally, peace. Marla didn't move her. She sat beside the child for hours, watching the moon crawl across the floorboards. She thought she heard something, soft claws on wood, a rustle in the corner, but it was probably just the wind. Or maybe not. It had rained all night. A quiet, trembling rain, the kind that tiptoed over the roof and blurred the view of the backyard until it was nothing but shadows and fog. Inside the Reed household, everything felt heavier. The walls carried silence like grief. The baby monitor pulsed faint static. The nursery's nightlight blinked like a heartbeat in the dark. And the couch was empty. Harlan stood barefoot in the hallway, gripping the edge of the doorway. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of what he now knew. The footage from the security camera was still playing in his mind, frame by heart-wrenching frame. Juniper. Climbing up beside them while they slept. Sitting beside Alara, always during the most intimate or vulnerable moments. Paw on her chest. Nose close to her breath. Watching. Waiting. Not attacking. Not truly. Not harming. She wasn't stopping us. Alara had whispered that morning, voice raw from hours of tears. She was protecting something. The baby? Or maybe Alara herself. They didn't understand it, not fully, but one thing was certain: Juniper had known something before anyone else had. She felt it, sensed it. Just like she had when she first walked through that door 7 years ago. A sick, rejected cub with too many secrets behind her wild, amber eyes. And now, 7 years later, Juniper was dying. The infection, Dr. Lorne had explained, was blood-borne. Congenital. It had flared up again, subtly at first, masked by her strange nightly behavior. But now the decline was clear, her appetite gone, her once sleek coat dulling, eyes glassy with pain. She doesn't have much time, he had said gently. Weeks, maybe days. Alara had crumpled in the clinic chair when she heard it. Her entire body folded in on itself, as if bracing for a second loss she wasn't ready to endure. I can't lose her, she'd sobbed into Harlan's chest. Not now. Not after everything. That night, they didn't lock the doors. They didn't set up cameras. They just let Juniper be. She lay on the rug near the nursery, weak but alert, eyes half closed as she listened to the soft cooing of the newborn in the crib beyond. Her breath rattled faintly. Every so often she twitched, like her body was already drifting somewhere farther than the room allowed. Harlan sat across from her, legs crossed, knees aching. Alara held their son, rocking gently, wordless. Do you remember the night she bit you? Harlan asked quietly. Alara smiled, small and sad. Which time? They both chuckled under their breath. No, the night we tried for the first time. The night I said I wanted a family, and you panicked. I didn't panic, she said, raising an eyebrow. You panicked. And Juniper bit you. She had good timing, Alara said, brushing a hand over the baby's head. She always knew. Even when I didn't. Juniper let out a quiet groan. It sounded almost like a purr at first, but ended in a cough that made both of them rise. She was shaking. Her paws twitched in the air like she was dreaming of running again, back into a forest she never really knew. The next morning, the light in the nursery was different. Alara was the first to notice it. She had dozed in the rocker, the baby curled against her chest. And when the sun finally broke through the blinds, she opened her eyes to stillness. No soft clicking of claws across the floor. No breath by the crib. Just silence. She stood up slowly. Juniper was still on the rug. Still curled in that same position. Still. Alara? Harlan called from the hallway. Coffee's ready. No answer. Just the sound of her breath catching. A single, splintering sob. They buried her beneath the oldest tree in the backyard. The same oak where Juniper used to perch when she was younger, tail flicking, ears rotating like satellite dishes. Alara wrapped her in the same knit blanket they used to swaddle her when she first came home from the rescue. The baby was quiet during the burial. As if he knew. She waited, Alara said. Later that night. Until he was born. Until I was okay. She waited until morning light. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in the house. The heaviness remained, but it came with warmth. A kind of aching gratitude. Elara kept one of Juniper's whiskers in a locket around her neck. Harlan added a small carved bobcat figure to the baby's mobile. They named their son Rowan, after the tree Juniper now slept beneath. And then, one evening, Elara found something else. Tucked behind a drawer in the nursery dresser, in a pocket Juniper had always pawed at, was a small stuffed animal, one Elara had lost years ago. A plush fox she used to keep as a child. How did she? She murmured, tears returning. Because Juniper had known. Juniper had remembered. Months passed. Then a year. Then another. Rowan grew quickly, curious and wild-spirited, with a strange affinity for climbing furniture and hiding under tables. One day, Elara found him sitting beneath the tree in the backyard, staring at something invisible. "Who are you talking to, honey?" Rowan looked up, serious. "The cat in the light." Elara froze. He pointed toward a flicker of sunshine in the leaves above. "She says she used to sleep here." Elara said nothing. She didn't need to.